There's no questions. 3 out of 4. Oh, 3 out of 4.
Yes, please hand the answers back to the original team. Pass the answer sheet back to the original team. End of the day, yeah. It'll be winners announcing end of the day.
Does this work? John at the back, can you hear me? I'm just pointing and waving at you. I think this is good. Let me try this one. How about that? Can you hear me now? Okay.
The fix should be working.
The which?
The fixed one should be working as well.
Oh, these ones. Hello. No? Hello.
Try tapping them.
Anyway, I'll use this one. So, good morning, everyone. My name's Malcolm Groves. You're stuck with me between now and lunch. Are we on track? Is lunch at like 12:30?
12:30, yeah.
12:30? Okay. So I've actually got 2 presentations to go through, a small one and a big one. So I'll probably do the big one first, and then at the end, once you're all tired and hungry and want something to eat, I'll hold you all up while I do the small one. Yeah. But what I want to talk about first is this presentation on continuous delivery. Now, this is not a code-heavy presentation. So if you came looking for code-heavy presentations, then check your email, do whatever you want to do. Mark will be back with the Delphi languages one. There's lots of code in that, so he's taken my percentage of the code to share. I didn't mean to structure the presentation this way, but after the Brisbane presentation yesterday, someone came up and told me that basically for the first third of the presentation, I'd made him feel really good about himself. And then for the next third, I made him feel really crap and think that he was a failure. And then the last third, he sort of came back again. And so I left him in a happy place. So I didn't really mean to do that, and I apologise if we go through a bit of a slump in the middle where everyone's feeling a bit of despair. But apparently by the end, we get out of it. Yeah? So anyway, what I want to start with is talking a little bit about kind of the state of software development in the industry, with some stats. Okay, this is from a New Zealand study, KPMG in New Zealand a few years ago. You can read the stuff in here, but basically half of these respondents indicated that their projects consistently failed to achieve what they were meant to do. Consistently, not occasionally. 50% consistently failed to achieve their objectives. Yeah. Another one, this was from Logica Management Consulting. 35% of organisations had abandoned not a project, but a major project, in the last 3 years. So these are the projects you see on the front page of the paper about, government banking, single view of a customer banking applications that get thrown out after 4 years and $1 million spent. Another one, this is another KPMG one, but a global one, not a New Zealand one. 600 projects worldwide. Half of the organisations had suffered a project failure in the last 12 months. And in fact, only 2% of the respondents reported that that their projects had achieved all of their intended benefits. Only 2%. Last one. This is McKinsey Group. Okay. On average, this was like 5,500 projects that they surveyed. On average, the large projects, I don't know what they define as a large project, ran 45% over budget, while at the same time delivering 56% less value. So if you do the maths on that, they went in thinking they were going to get 100, spend 100 and get 100. They spent 150 and they got 50. Yeah? If that makes sense. That's maybe a really bad analogy. But my point of this is, as an industry, we actually kind of suck at this. Yeah? I know everyone here is really good And just like I am, of course. But as an industry, everyone else seems to be terrible and they're pulling the average down.
But how many of those figures were using Delphi?
Well, okay, separate conversation. But if you look at this has actually been true for a long time. If you go back through these studies back into last century, I can remember seeing like chaos group reports and other studies going back into the 90s and even into the late 80s, and they were similar numbers. For the most part, we might be getting better at some things, but we're not getting better at the big picture of delivering software, for some reason. And I was thinking last night, there's probably not many other industries where this would be tolerated. But I think we're in a kind of a sweet spot where they don't have many other choices, because what else are they going to do? Everyone has to go to software, so they're stuck with us. With all those other guys. Of course, it's awesome that they're stuck with the people in this room. Not like the guys in Brisbane, that was terrible. Anyway, how many people, you may not have read this, and you probably can't even see this, because it's quite blurry. It's nice and clear on my screen. But how many people have heard of Dr. Royce and this white paper from the 70s? Yep. Have you read it?
Not read it.
No? Okay. I tried to read it. You don't want to read it. It's quite dense. But it's quite, Dr. Royce is quite a famous character in the world of project management, and also in the world of sort of software development and software process. This is the paper. He's the guy, and this is the paper that introduced the phrase waterfall method. This. Even if you haven't read the paper, you've probably seen a picture like this, drawn up on a whiteboard somewhere, by someone who doesn't know much beyond that picture. But this is how we're going to manage the project. So, in some ways, Dr. Royce has, well, you might think that Dr. Royce has a lot to answer for, introducing the world to the waterfall method. Is anyone not familiar with the waterfall method? No? Good. I was going to say, you're so lucky. But, in fact, it's not his fault. This paper came out, and that picture there, I think is on page 2 or 3, I can't remember, but it's pretty early in the paper. And it seems like the industry as a whole saw that picture and went, oh, that's what we're doing. That's a nice clear picture, it's easy to draw on a whiteboard, it's easy to explain, that's how we build software. And as an industry, it seems like we all bolted off and started doing it. But if everyone hadn't stopped at that picture and had actually read to the next paragraph, the very next paragraph, literally under that picture, says, the implementation described above is risky and invites failure. He told us in the paper, the original paper, don't do it this way. But what did we do? We all charged up and did it that way. If you read the next bit, this is quite a dense sentence, but effectively it says the testing phase, let me go back, testing phase down here, and it's that one, second last one. The testing phase, which occurs at the end of the development cycle, is the first event for which all these things are experienced instead of being analysed. These phenomena are not analysable. So he's basically saying it's only at the end that you get to actually see if this stuff works outside of theory. And these things are not easy to figure out if they work outside of theory. So he told us, don't do this. Here's a picture, it's seductive, it looks like it should work great, don't do it. Nobody read that sentence. We spent the next 20 years all charging off to the waterfall projects, and then the next 20 years after that, has there been 4 years since that? Close to 20 years after that, trying to come up with alternatives to do instead of waterfall. Later on in the paper, he actually gives you this picture, and you can see why this one didn't take off. Not quite as easy to draw on a whiteboard. I tried a couple of times to figure out what that was all doing. I didn't manage. But this part, if you look at just that side of the dotted line up there, there's a couple of key additions. feedback cycles. This is, what he was proposing in 1970 is an iterative method. He didn't call it that. Yeah. But it was a loop. Go through this process, when you get down to testing, drive back up through the design, through the requirements, and go around again, and go around again, and go around again. So he told us back in 1970 we should be doing Agile. But we just took 20 years to learn that through hard experiences and before we started coming back to something iterative. Yeah? So, sometimes, you've probably all seen this series of pictures on the internet. Yeah. Every time I see this, I think of software development. You know? If you haven't seen it, I'll run through them. You know, there's a crane pulling a car out of the water. What happens? The crane falls in the water. Yeah? What do? If you're a software developer, get a bigger crane. Yeah? Throw more people on the project. Okay, pulling that out. I actually suspect that the coming picture is fake, but it's a good picture.
Break one.
What do they say? The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. Well, for a long time in software development, that's kind of what we've been doing. Yeah, that last project didn't go so well. This time, it'll be better. This time it'll work. Oh, and then in 6 months' time, you have the same conversation. Yeah, that didn't go so well, but this time we bought a new tool, or we bought we're using RAD now, or we're using Agile, or Scrum, or whatever it is we're using now. This time it'll be different. Yeah. Hasn't been. Yeah. So, what is anyone want to hazard a guess on the biggest problem with that? I've already kind of hinted at it, but
Feedback.
no feedback. No feedback. Well, there is feedback, but it comes way too late. It comes after 6 or 9 months of development, and the customer gets it and goes, "What's that? That's not what I asked for." Okay, what do you want? And then you start the iteration, 9-month sprints, but they probably can't be called sprints. Yeah, biggest problem: delayed feedback. Yeah. So, if you forget all of that stuff, what are we actually trying to do? You know, when I think about what we are actually trying to do when we're building software, it's something like this, okay? Where we're trying to deliver a working app to the customer, some sort of value, an application, some code, a system, whatever it is, to the customer, and get feedback as quickly, and then keep doing it as quickly as we can. Yeah? But you know, what's the saying? Do it as quickly as you can, but no quicker. Yeah? As quickly as possible. So this is really what we want to do. Deliver something, get some feedback. Oh, okay, not quite right. Deliver something again. Yeah, okay. And do that as fast and as cheaply as we can. Yeah? Fast, cheap feedback. Okay. So that you're not spending 3 months building something before you find out that, oh, no, okay, we misunderstood. We need to dive over here and throw away 2 of those 3 months worth of work. We've done 2 weeks worth of work, or 1 week worth of work, or whatever time frame you decide it is. And then the customer sees you going off track, and we can get back on track, and we've wasted a few days or something. Yeah? Much better. Yeah? So let's do a little thought experiment. Yeah? What would your development cycle be like if you could only compile once a week? Yeah? So let's say Friday afternoons, just before you walk out of the office, you can do a compile. And you go home, come back on Monday morning, look at the results from the compile, and go, oh, okay, damn it, I had a syntax error. Okay, there's a weekend gone, I've got to wait till next Friday. Or,
Can I just clarify, you do mean compiling, not build?
for this thought experiment, it doesn't matter. Yep. What was I saying? Oh yeah. So basically, Monday morning we start work. We start working on the requirements. Write code. Probably Tuesday, Wednesday, we're starting to write code that relies on code we wrote on Monday. Thursday, Friday, we've now built a few layers of stuff that kind of relies on each other. Kick off the compile, go home. Yeah. Monday morning, come in. Forget even just the syntax errors that would spoil your day, but, okay, some of this stuff isn't quite, some of the stuff I did last Monday isn't quite right. What was I doing last Monday? And then, if you can remember what you were working on last Friday, because you then went on to stuff on Tuesday and Wednesday, sorry, last Monday, you still went on to stuff on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. If you can throw your head back into Monday and go, oh, that's right, I was working on such and such. Okay, and then not only do you have to get yourself back into that mindset of what was I doing, yeah, trying to remember, and then look at your code and go, did I write this? Like, yeah, okay, yeah, it looks vaguely familiar. Then you've potentially, depending on what's gone wrong, the work you did on Wednesday or Thursday or Friday that depends on that stuff might now be wasted. You might have to chuck it away and redo it because something fundamental has changed. You know? So we don't work like that, thank goodness. Although I started out as a C++ programmer and we used to compile once a day. Because, actually twice a day, we'd kick one off when we left because it was a 90-minute compile. So we'd kick it off before lunch, and then when we came back it was close to finished, and then write code for the afternoon, and then kick off another build before we left. Yeah.
You're running Microsoft,
No, it was actually Ballin C3 point something. Anyway, that's off the track. It was a horrible code base though. So we don't do that. Like now I compile, well, I don't know, it's almost muscle memory, you're just constantly hitting Control F9, Control F9. You know, maybe it's every couple of minutes, you know, or you've got like some tools are compiling constantly, yeah. But why? So that we can find out straight away, so we can get fast, cheap feedback. Control F9 is fast, cheap feedback. It doesn't tell me that my application is right, but it gives me some feedback. It gives me some confidence that I can keep moving forward, yeah. And so I do it all the time. Yeah. Sometimes twice in a row, just in case the first one didn't take. Oh, now I'm even more confident. Yeah. So, what else? What if you could only run your unit tests once a month? Yeah. Same kind of thing. You're not getting that feedback. You're not getting that confidence. Yeah. You write a month's worth of code, run your unit tests. Oh, something broke. Oh, something I wrote in the last month broke, you know, caused a regression. Yeah? What? Well, I've got a month's worth of code to go through and figure out which part of it broke it and what was, why did I touch that? Oh, that's right, yeah, I was changing that. Get your head back into that space. And then again, potentially, you've got rework to do, you've got waste there, potentially quite a lot of waste if it was something early in the month. Yeah? So again, we don't do this. We purposely keep the runtime of our unit tests fairly short so that you can run them frequently. Not every time you compile, necessarily, but several times an hour I'm kicking off my unit test just to make sure that everything's cool. Yeah. So, you know, again, fast, cheap feedback, regular feedback, gives you that confidence to keep moving forward. Yeah. So, last thought experiment. What if you only delivered software to your customer every 3 months? Yeah, you're not laughing now, are you? Because some of you deliver software to your customers every 6 months. It's even worse than that, or every 9 months or 12 months. Yeah, but it's the same thing. Yeah. We spend 3 months, say, beavering away, writing software, hand it over to our customers. Sorry, we don't. No one in this room. Everyone outside. Hand it over to our customers after 3 months and they go, oh yeah, okay, it's kind of what we wanted. Not quite, you know. And then you've got to potentially waste some of the code that you've written. Yeah, go back, get yourself back into the mindset of what you were doing when you did this stuff. Yeah. So it is kind of the same thing, but many of us, I don't want to be too, I don't want to say everybody, because not everybody does this, but many of us don't do this. Many of us are guilty of this. Yeah, we don't get fast, cheap feedback on our deliveries, yeah, the end product. Yeah. Yet when I talked in that slide before, that was actually the point, was to deliver software. Yeah. So these are all feedback loops, obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but my position is make them short to minimise waste. Okay. When we do a lot of work around continuous delivery with customers, and one of the questions that I think is that I always like to ask teams is let's map out how long it takes for a requirement or an idea or whatever it is, a customer request, to go through from, you know, request coming in, go through your current process until it's actually in their hands. Yep. So everything from, you know, the idea comes in, you've got to talk about it, you've got to discuss it, get some discovery happening, and then it might go into a design phase, there might be an estimation phase, there might be many levels of approval that have to happen, budgeting, all sorts of stuff. Then finally, a developer gets their hands on it, so they actually start to do something, through to release, and release being the customer's got it to play with, you know, to validate, whether it's a beta release or whatever it is. We were in at one of the insurance groups in one of the major banks the other day. We did this on a whiteboard. Well, it was funny. When I asked this initially, they went, oh, a couple of months. Yep. So I said, oh, okay, let's map it out and actually see. I can't remember the exact number, but it was something like 100, it was 120 something days. I can't remember, it was 123 days or something like that. Call it 120 days. From idea to the customers playing with it. You know? That's one of the worst ones I've seen. And it was, in fact, even if you cut it down and said, well, forget all of the approvals and budgeting and all that sort of stuff. But just once the developer can start writing code, or in fact, once the developer's done writing code and wants to get it through into all the tests and everything, through QA, through code review, through, you know, the release process and actually into a customer's hands, it was something like 60 days. Yeah? So their couple of months off the cuff response was pretty right, but it only covered a fraction of what they were thinking of. Yeah? We were only having this conversation 2 weeks ago, so we haven't done anything with those guys. But there's another customer I'm thinking of who was not quite as bad, but it was in like the 70s or 80s was their initial number. And the development portion of it was, I can't remember exactly, but it was like 3-4 weeks or something like that. Through continuous development, we got it down to 45 minutes or 46 minutes or something. So a developer could say, here's some code that I've just written, have it go through tests, performance tests, security tests, other functional and non-functional tests, UI tests, code review, bang, static analysis, go through the deployment process, bundling up however it was being deployed, and it was available for the customer 46 minutes later. Yeah. Now that sort of rapid feedback lets you experiment. Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're going to have this in your talk, but I've come across organisations where they do exactly that.
Yep.
And the next problem they have is that because the code's dynamically changing underneath you, the users don't know what the fuck's happening when you push a button.
I am going to talk about that.
Okay.
So, but what it enables, when you've got a, let's say, forget all this stuff, but when you've got a cycle that takes 60 days or whatever it was, that doesn't lend itself to experimentation. Okay? Let's try this, put it out there, deploy it to 5% of our users and see what the response is. And then if the response is positive, we can roll it out further. If the response is negative, we can pull it back. 60-day cycle doesn't lend itself to that. A 45-minute cycle might. Yeah? Now, if you're a web app, it's much easier, obviously. You can automatically deploy it to certain customers, monitor it, and automatically roll it back if it's not good. But even on a desktop app, we've got customers who are doing this. Yeah? So it lends itself to experimentation. Yeah? And, well, it does a bunch of things. But that's the idea here, is to shrink that down so we get rapid, cheap feedback. Yeah? It's much cheaper to spend a bit of time doing something, 45 minutes later you're starting to get feedback, than do something 60, 90 days later you're getting feedback. Yeah? Okay, so to go back to the old waterfall thing, obviously we started to wake up after a while, and lots of other stuff came out. Rational Unified Process. I went on a week-long course for Rational Unified Process years ago, and I came out of it unable to write software any better than I was when I walked in, but I knew a whole bunch of documents that I had to create. Yeah? So it was like a 1-week document creation course. Yeah? Create all these documents, project still was a disaster. We had lots of documents, it was well documented. And we've had lots of stuff since. Agile, Scrum, and I'm not criticising, well I am criticising RAD, but I'm not criticising all of these things. We use Scrum, you know, Scrum's fine. But it doesn't necessarily help with all of this stuff. Yeah? If you actually have a look at the Agile Manifesto, the very first principle, it's like the second sentence on the page, and the first sentence is, we maintain these things, and then there's number 1, is our highest priority is to satisfy the customer through continuous delivery, I should have underlined that, of valuable software. Yeah? It's even in the first sentence. Yeah? There's a link there, if you don't believe it. You shouldn't believe it. You never believe someone who's holding a microphone. So, what is continuous delivery about? Okay? It's about creating a repeatable, reliable process for releasing software. Yeah? I remember I used to work somewhere that there was a guy, one of the guys' jobs was to do the releases. Yeah? He was a developer most of the time, but whenever we couldn't avoid it any longer and we had to do a release, he'd go, okay, it's release day, everyone, you know, I'm branching, stay out of the repository for a while. This was in the old days. And he would spend the day doing the release. And it was reasonably repeatable because he had a document that told him all the things he had to do. Yeah? But it took him all day. And apart from not being fun for him, you know, it took him all day. So if he went to lunch and came back and started at the wrong step as the next one, at the end of the day, or the next day when the customer got it, we had to do it all again. Yeah. So it wasn't reliable, and it certainly wasn't fast. Yeah. And as a result, we did it as infrequently as we could get away with. Yeah. I can't remember what it was meant to be. Let's say it was meant to be every 3 months. It would often be 4 or 5 months before the customer was ringing going, haven't seen a release for a while. Yeah, okay, we'll do it next week. Yeah, we're a bit busy this week, but yeah. And he was the only guy who knew how to do it. If he'd gone under a bus or got sick of doing releases and went somewhere else, we would have been in trouble. Yeah. So number 1, it's about that. And number 2, to relate to that, is about automating almost everything. Yeah. Everything that you can possibly automate, automate it. And even the things you can't automate, try it. Because often you find out you can. Keep everything under version control. And I don't mean all your source. That should be a given. Yeah. I mean everything. If it's a web app and you're deploying to a web server and you need to do a bit of a custom configuration on the web server, well, the scripts to do that custom configuration should be in version control. If there's a bunch of dependencies that need to be on Windows that you rely on, they should be in version control. Everything. You should be able to go from, now this is the end goal, obviously, you don't get to this overnight, but you should be able to go from brand new machine, press a button, this runs, your application's up and going. Yeah, with dependencies, databases, whatever else is required. Yeah? So everything under version control. This is kind of a mantra of continuous delivery. If it hurts, like I was just describing the build process, our response was it hurts so we won't do it we'll do it as little as we can because it's painful. Which seems like a fairly sane, it seems like a fairly sane response. The response here is the opposite. If it hurts, do it more often. Bring the pain forward. Not because it's masochistic, but because if you're forced to do it frequently, you'll find a way to automate away the pain. Yeah? If you're forced to do it every 2 months, then you might just go, suck it up and go, all right, I'm going to have a bad day every 2 months. Yeah? But if you're forced to do it every day, or multiple times a day, every hour, then you are going to find a way to minimise the pain. Yeah? Build quality, and we'll talk about that more. Done means released. Done doesn't mean, well, I've finished the code and worked on my machine, so I sent it to QA. Yeah, done. Yeah. No, done means the customer's got it, and they're using it. Yeah? And this one's important. Everybody's responsible for the release process. Nobody on the team has a more important job than fixing the release process when it fails. Yeah? I'll talk more about this later on, but this is really critical. In some places, when the build breaks or when the release train breaks, an email goes out and says, the release is broken by Fred's checking. And everyone points at Fred and goes, haha, we're all going home, you're not. Yep. Well, it might be fun, but it's not good. Yeah? Not good for team morale. Yeah? In general, we try and do it where this is a team, okay? Team, the release has broken, and nobody on the team has a more important job than fixing the release train. Yep. Because when you don't, when you let red builds or red releases build up, pretty soon your history is all red, and you've got to go back a long way since you've had a green release. And then you're not doing continuous delivery. You're doing continuous attempted delivery, yeah, which is not the same thing. Yeah? And last thing, improve continuously. Yeah? And you get sucked into it. You don't even have to force yourself to do this. You start really small, like I'll build one in a second. You can start just with that, and then it sucks you in. So it's so tempting. You go, oh, I'll just automate a bit more. Oh, actually, I could stick another stage in there. Hang on, I've found a code coverage tool. I could put that in behind our tests so I can see if, yes, our tests are passing, but are we covering everything? Are we testing everything? You don't even have to tell yourself to improve continuously. You kind of want to. Because as soon as you see some of the pain start to go away, you realise you can throw off more of the pain. Yeah? Okay, so what does this actually look like at a conceptual level? What I've got here, you don't have to use these branches or stages. You can create your own stages. But what I've got is, I think, a fairly typical set of branches in a version control system. So I've got development, the main development branch. I've got a staging branch where we do all QA and kind of put it into as close as possible to production environment, but it's not production. Yep. And then we've got a release branch. Yeah. So developer comes along, creates a feature branch to start working on something, chugs away at it, and at some point does a commit back to the development branch. Okay? So how continuous delivery should work is that immediately kicks off the build stage in your pipeline. Your continuous delivery tool is monitoring your version control system. As soon as it sees a commit, it goes, all right, hang on, let me check it out, and I'll run these tests on it. Okay? You can configure it any way you like, but this is a pretty common way to configure it. Okay? So our build phase starts, assuming if the build fails, we can send out email messages, we can send out Slack messages, we can do HipChat messages, whatever sort of notification you want, but we notify someone. Yeah? But assuming that works, we then go into the test phase. Maybe we run some unit tests. Yeah? Just to get that level of confidence. Maybe we run, it's cut off at the bottom, but I think that was some static analysis that I put in there. Okay? Maybe we run fix insight over our code, TMS fix insight over our code to see is there, okay, all the tests pass, but there's some code in here that might be hiding a bug. Yeah? All stuff designed to quickly get you some confidence. Yeah? Because those two first phases really are, if you might have heard of another phrase called continuous integration. That's that. That's continuous integration. Okay? And the idea is test that my code that I've just committed back to the development branch integrates nicely with all the other code on the development branch, code that everyone else has been working on. Yeah? The goal here is, like, there's no hard fast number, but I don't like that phase to go more than 5 minutes. Okay? So within 5 minutes as a developer, I want to be getting some sort of notification that, yep, all good, or it's a problem. Yeah? Tests fail, static analysis fail, whatever it is. Okay? Because that's my fast, cheap feedback. As a developer, all I had to do was commit. Yep. Commit, get up, stretch my legs, go and grab a coffee. By the time I come back, I've got a notification that either, yep, your code that you just committed plays nicely with all the other code that's in the development branch. Yeah? Gives me that confidence. Yeah? I move on to the next thing. If it didn't work, I know it's something I did in the last 5 minutes, yeah, or that someone else did in the last, since I checked it out. But I've got a small amount of stuff that I have to figure out what broke what. And so there's sort of a small job size. And not more than that, but in addition to that, I don't have to think back to what I was doing a week ago or a month ago. It was stuff I was just doing, so I should still be in the headspace. Yeah. Okay, so assuming that works, a few things happen. We get that notification, like I said, whatever mechanism you like. And then, again, depending on your thing, but very often, this commit back onto the development branch, some of our customers just commit directly, have their developers committing straight from feature branches onto the development branch. Some places want that to be a pull request and have a code review take place. Yeah, so it's up to you if you can have. So this could be automatic or it could be a process that you have to go through. So if it was a pull request, you know, the continuous delivery tool can generate a pull request, it can notify the people who have to do the code review, it can even run some of the code review tools first to give them something to look at initially. Yeah? But whichever way it happens, once we've had success, the CD tool will move that, for example, up onto the staging branch. Yeah? Promote it. So now we get more tests jumped in, more tests that would have been too time consuming to run. If we tried to run them here, the developer might have been waiting 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to get the feedback. Yeah? And that's starting to get too long, because then by that stage they've moved on to work on something else. Yeah? But we then go deeper. You know, we might have functional tests, we might have automated UI tests, we might have performance tests, we might do security analysis. In some of our customers, one of our customers is deploying stuff onto Amazon. And so some of the tests we'll do in here, because we're not so time constrained, some of the tests we'll do in here is we'll deploy it up onto, still staging, but we'll deploy it up onto Amazon on a couple of servers and load balance between them, get it going, and then we'll rip out one of the servers, we'll pull them down and see what happens. Does it load balance properly, or do we start getting errors? Yeah? So you can start to think of all sorts of nasty tricks that you can do to your application. You know, poke it in ways it's not meant to be poked, and see how it performs. Yeah? Because we don't have the time constraints. So these sets of tests might take an hour to run, 2 hours to run, whatever. Okay? But we bash it as hard as we can. Okay? In an environment as close as possible to our production environment, or as similar as possible to our production environment. Yeah. But if we're happy after all of that, if they've all passed it, obviously if any of these fail, we can throw notifications back and build, the release goes red. But assuming that all works, okay, we can then either automatically promote to the deploy, release branch, or we can have a manual approval where we build up the release all ready to go, package it, run the installer, the scripts, everything like that, have it ready to go, but then notify someone and say, do you want this to go out, and have them click a yes or a no button, yeah, give approval. So it doesn't have to automatically flow out, okay? But that's the idea. And then, you know, even while all this has been happening, maybe another feature branch has been committed to back to the development branch, and another instance of all this will kick off. Okay? Or maybe this same developer has continued on a bit more and wants to commit again. Same thing again. So every commit results in a release candidate. And I'm phrasing that really carefully. Yeah? Because it's up to you to decide who they go to, or even if they go to anybody. Yeah? But you are ready to release at any moment. Yeah? Customer rings up and says, can we get a new release? You go, yeah. There's one from 20 minutes ago. Is there one with a particular feature in it you want? Or you just want the latest one? Yeah, there's one from 20 minutes ago. You want it? Yeah. So you're ready to release at any point. Whether you actually send it to a customer, to your whole customer base, or whether you send it to some beta customers, or whether you even just send it to someone internal who's the customer owner and say, you know, I want you to validate this. That's an organisational decision. But as a development team, we're delivering constantly. Yeah? Or we're ready to deliver constantly. So that's the idea. Okay? Why would you do this? Some people are looking at that picture going, why on earth would you do that? Looks complicated. Yeah? Won't work here. All the reasons. I actually got some slides with some of the common reasons why the objections to this later on. Why would you do this? Well, lower deployment risks. What does that mean? Same thing I was talking about. Let's say it's easier on a web app, but it's very possible we do this with customers on a desktop app as well. But let's say that you're deploying every 3 months, yeah, your desktop app. You do the build, you do the release, send it out, doesn't work. Okay? Well, there's 3 months worth of changes in there that could be leading to it not working. Okay? So your risk surface is quite big because there's 3 months worth of work in there, or 6 months, or whatever it is. Okay? If you're sending them one every week, your risk surface is smaller because there's only a week's worth of changes in there. Okay? So the things that could go wrong are in a smaller group, and if they do, easier to find because they're in a smaller group, and it's more recent, so it's easier to dive in and fix. Yep. So smaller batch sizes give you lower deployment risks. It doesn't remove the deployment risks, but reduces them, makes them more manageable. Yep. The other thing that comes out of this is real measurable progress. You know, one of the most common sources of frustration between customers and developers is lack of visibility. You know, paying all this money, we've agreed on what they're building, it's been 3 months, I haven't seen anything, but they keep telling me they're working hard. Is there anything happening? Well, here, they can grab the release every afternoon if they want. They can grab it morning and lunch if they want. Yeah? They'll see progress. I'll talk about it later on. It changes the dynamic between the customer and the developers. All of the anxiety that the customer, not all, but a lot of the anxiety that the customer has starts to go away because they're seeing progress. Yeah? Stuff's happening. Yeah? And like I said before, fast feedback. Okay, one caveat before we go deeper. Don't even consider this if you haven't got your version control story sorted out. Okay, this depends on version control. So if you're still getting up to speed with or sorting out what your version control process is, or you haven't got one, then shelve this. Get your version control sorted out. Yeah. But then, this is the next thing you should do. Now I know that's a bold statement. I don't know most of your development processes, I don't know your situations, but I still think this is the next thing you should do. Because if you look at it, every other improvement that flows out of, or every other process that flows out of Agile, that flows out of DevOps, that flows out of all of the Lean, all these other things, gets driven by this. Yeah? The very act of doing a really simple one of these and then gradually starting to automate more makes you go, okay, I need to, we've got this process, this manual process of setting up the images of the machines before we deploy the application to it. I need to automate that. Well, that'll probably drive you to figure out how to script that up, maybe with some tools like Ansible or other configuration management tools. Well, that's part of DevOps. That's a big part of DevOps. It's driving you towards doing these good practices anyway, not because you read them in a magazine or because the boss was reading a magazine on a flight and came in and said, oh, we should be DevOpsing. But because you're trying to solve a problem and that's the solution that leads you to. Yeah? So what we found is with people we've walked into places and they've said, oh yeah, we're an Agile shop because we do stand-up meetings. Yeah? And then you get into it and they're going, oh, well, we want to do code reviews, we want to do all these other things, we want to do configuration management. What we found is putting in continuous delivery, which is pretty easy, pretty cheap, get started, get going. Actually, then we come back a little while later and they've already started doing configuration management just because it allowed them to automate a bit more of their process. Yeah? Before you know it, they've got the whole process going and along the way they've gone, oh, we're DevOpsing. Yeah? We didn't even realise it. Okay. So, there's a million tools to do this. Well, not a million, but there's at least 1,000 tools that will let you do this. Yeah? But given this audience, there's two that I will look at. The first one is a tool called Continuous CI. It's by Vincent in Canberra, his team. It's by the guys who do Final Builder. Okay? If you're already a Final Builder user, you will be super comfortable in Continuous CI. Okay? So if it uses the same names for things, some of the actions are even called the same things. It lets you call out to Final Builder scripts. If you're a Final Builder shop, no brainer, go and look at this. Okay? If you're not, you can still go and have a look at it, because Vincent's a good guy and he builds good tools. But the other one that you can look at is this thing called Jenkins. It's an open source tool. It's kind of, in fact, some people use it like a verb. When they actually mean to say we're doing continuous delivery, they actually say, I've had multiple customers saying, oh yeah, we're doing Jenkins. It almost becomes what they think of as continuous delivery. Okay? So it's an open source tool. It's the market leader. Like a year or more ago, I saw some stats that said 70% of all CD pipelines worldwide were running on Jenkins. Yeah? So it's it's the big dog. Okay? That doesn't mean it's the best, but it's the big dog. Yeah? The other nice thing about it is there are thousands of plugins. Okay? So if you want your continuous delivery pipeline to, you build your Delphi app and then you want to run it in a Windows 7 virtual machine and run some tests against it, and then run it in a Windows 10 virtual machine and run some tests against it, and then Windows 95 virtual machine and run some tests against it. Yeah? Great. There's plugins for Jenkins that let you drive VirtualBox and VMware and pretty much every other virtual machine system you've ever heard of. Yeah? That make that pretty easy. Yeah? You want to, later on we'll do, I want to run my unit tests and have the XML results sucked back into Jenkins and drawn up in a nice graph and everything. Awesome. There's a plugin that does that for you. Yeah? So there's thousands of plugins. I've got to stop saying million. It's really actively developed, and finally, it has a nice UI. Until relatively recently, people used Jenkins in spite of its UI, not because of it. It's really powerful, but man, it's ugly. Okay? But just literally in the last 2 months, they've been working on it for a long time, but just in the last couple of months, they've released this thing called Blue Ocean, which I'll show you. Which is actually a really nice user experience on top of the Jenkins engine. Yeah? So it actually becomes much more approachable for people. Okay, so let's have a look at it, and then I'll come back and talk about some of the objections, some of the reasons why you think you may not want to do this, and that sort of stuff. Okay, I'm going to have to put this down. Yeah.
Just one question. Where does the customer fit into all of this?
Yep.
Do you have an advocate in the customer site who comes to your software meetings and looks at these things?
Well, we do, but that's not really related to this. So the short answer, unfortunately, is the consultant's answer. It depends. Depends on the type of app you're building and also who your customer is. We've got, if we think about, we've got 2 customers who are like ISVs. They're building software that they then, desktop software that they then sell to other companies. For their CD pipeline, the customer takes 2 forms. One is one of the internal product managers. So if it's a customer that they want to be very friendly, then they route stuff to the, like early builds and stuff, they might route to the internal sort of custom, I think the title is product owner or something. But he's basically the customer representative. He works for them, not the customer, but he basically gathers all the requirements and everything. He's the domain expert. But also then, once they get to more stable builds or whatever, they've got a beta group of customers who they know will take things. And so they might send the CD pipeline in one of their cases is actually uploading it to a private web page to build every time, every commit. And the customers can come in at any moment and grab a new build, and they fairly regularly do, every week or so. So it just depends. Other places, like if it's a web or a mobile application, and you might be deploying server-side pieces, back-end pieces, then the customer is really the end customer. And you do things like A/B testing, where you put up a new version in parallel to the old version and route some of the requests to it and monitor the results. And if it's not failing, okay, cool, gradually we'll start routing more of them over and pull this one down. Or if we start getting errors, route them back, pull this one down, and we've got a release failure. So it just depends on the type of application. Yeah. One of the common objections is I can't give new releases of software to my customer 4 times a day. Yeah, totally get it. But you can give it to someone who will give you some feedback. Yeah. Maybe not 4 times a day, but you can do, so you can give it regularly to someone who will give you feedback, which is probably better than what you're currently doing. And you can be ready at any moment to give someone a release. Yeah. Okay, so let's have a look at this. What's the time? Okay, it's all right. So I've got Jenkins, just go and download it, it's open source. I've got it installed in a virtual machine which is stopped. Okay. Actually, yes, that happened to me yesterday too. So this time before I started talking, I checked that my virtual machine was running. It's shut down in the meantime. Okay. So I've got Jenkins installed on Windows. You can install it on Windows, Mac, Linux, probably other things I've never tried. I've seen people install it on Raspberry Pis, whatever. When you install it on Windows, for example, it installs as a service, and you access it through a web browser. Okay. I tend to I'll have a local instance of Jenkins running on my virtual machine that's doing sort of CI, continuous integration, while I'm working on my feature branch. And then when I check it into the repository somewhere else, we've got a centralized version of Jenkins running that's monitoring our repository and grabbing it and running things. So even when we've got guys on site, on customer site, and they're doing work, in another state or whatever, and they do a check-in, our instance of Jenkins will fire up and run a whole bunch of tests on it and send results out to them. Yeah. Okay, so I thought we would have started one now. So in a second this will start up. This is just Windows 10. Then I'll come out to my browser. I won't refresh just yet because it's not up and running. But actually let me start with what they euphemistically or whatever, or generously refer to as classic Jenkins, which everyone else refers to as ugly Jenkins. So this is classic Jenkins. Let me see if this is running again so I can actually click on something. Come on, wake up, here we go. Okay. So actually, if I click this and go out of Blue Ocean, so this is Jenkins, not the prettiest thing you've ever seen, but basically you can come in here, see all of your, sort of start to drill down into your different repositories. Here's 3 CD pipelines that I've got set up against this particular pipeline. If we drill into this one, here's my branches. I've only got one branch with tests running at the moment, but we can see a few things. We can see all of the runs of my pipeline that have previously occurred, the different stages. So here's the checkout from the SCM, here's the build, here's the unit test. Yeah, and we can see, okay, we had it running for a while, but then it failed in this stage, and we can go in and see what the logs were and what the details were about the failure. Oh, but here we got it going again, and we've had a few builds since then. Yeah. And up here we can see the results of our unit tests. So probably one of these failures was due to a unit test failure. And you can see here our failures for unit tests started to creep up a little bit, but then we got it back under control, and it's been no red for the last few versions. Yeah. If you go into, actually let me show you a couple of things before we go into Blue Ocean. If we go into Jenkins, we go Manage Jenkins, down here you can see Manage Plugins. So these are all plugins available, that's what we want. These are all the plugins that are available for us. So if you want your build script to control something in AWS. You can see there's a whole bunch of plugins here to do AWS stuff. Okay, deploy stuff to there, to do serverless stuff with AWS Lambda. There's a whole bunch of them. Yeah? To do load balancing of even your build of Jenkins, you can do load balancing across different instances, all that sort of stuff. If you want to do something with VirtualBox, I think there's one for that. Yeah, there we go, VirtualBox plugin. Lets you fire up instances of VMs inside VirtualBox and then push binaries across to run them in maybe different, run your tests in different versions of Windows or something like that. Yeah? So this is one of the cool, really cool things about using Jenkins in particular is the heaps of plugins. Yeah? But I'll come back to that in a minute. Let's actually go into Blue Ocean. They're sort of gradually introducing it, so by default when you install Jenkins, it'll still have the old UI, but because people are used to it, but there'll be a button at the top that says open in Blue Ocean. So if we go to my pipelines here, here's those same pipelines. Let's go into that one that we were just looking at then. Here's the recent runs, and we can see the red ones and the green ones. I'll drill into those in a second, but let's actually go in and look at the pipeline. Let's edit the pipeline, and so we can see what's in it. It's a really simple one. It's only a couple of stages. It's setting some environment variables at the beginning. If we go in here, we can see it's calling MS build in this case to build our Delphi project. There is a RAD Studio plugin for Jenkins. It's just not terribly actively maintained, so it still seems to work. Last time I have checked it with Tokyo, but it still worked with Berlin, but because it hasn't been terribly active, I've tended not to use it. I just fall back to MS Build, but it's there, so you could use it. So we're doing a build. In this case, we're doing a build, and then we're running our unit tests. We're doing a build of our unit tests, and then we're running our unit tests. And you can click, like if you want to do another stage after that, we can click here and say, this is my, I don't know, name stage, click in the wrong place. This is my let's call it release. Okay, release stage, and then we can add a step. Yeah, and there's a whole bunch of whatever plugins you've got installed, the actions will show up in there that you can add a step. You know, promote this in my version control, tag something in version control, start up the server on AWS, copy the file across, or whatever it is you want to do. Okay, or if you want things to happen in parallel, like often, sorry, I didn't mean to go out of there. Often especially in your unit tests or in your testing phase, you can get your unit tests running on one machine and fire up another machine and get your automated UI tests running, yeah? Or do your static analysis over on one machine while your tests are running on this other machine. So you can do stages in parallel. We can just add another one here and say, okay, this is my static analysis, and I'll add a step to do that. Yep. So you can branch them out that way. Yeah. Now, this editor, this is something important. All this is doing for us is building up a text file. Yeah. It's just a nice way to edit a text file. You can totally go out and edit a text file yourself, and often I do because this editor is only fairly new. So I've kind of got used to editing the text file directly, and I'll show you the text file in a second. But what's really important, if we go to that same, let's go to that same repository, okay, and we'll go to that Jenkins support branch that we were just looking at. All that's building up is this file called Jenkins file, and it goes into our repository. That's the key part. Okay. So my pipeline, my CD pipeline, is versioned with my application. Yeah? It's just another piece of source code. So if I add something to my application that requires extra steps in my CD pipeline or whatever it is, when I'm editing the code to bring in those things, I edit the pipeline and I commit them together. If the QA team has to roll back and stand up an instance of 2 versions ago to do some testing, okay, they get the 2 versions ago CD pipeline. Yeah? So it's all versioned together with your source code. Yeah? And so if you have a look at this guy, you'll be able to see, actually, let me make it a bit bigger. It maps reasonably closely to what visually we're just seeing. Yeah? Here's some initial setup. There's me setting my BDS directory. Here are my stages. Here's a stage called build, which is where I've got my MS build call. Here's my stage called unit test, which is where I've got my unit test being built and run. And then I've got a post phase, which is kind of at the end of it all. And then there's an always block, which is kind of like your finally. Always do a couple of things. I'm archiving the executable that we built. Yeah, and I'll show you what that means and where that ends up in a second. And then I'm taking the results from my unit tests. I'm using this NUnit plugin that pulls in the results from my DUnit tests and publishes them inside Jenkins. Yeah, this is how I was getting that graph before. Yeah. Now, those two are kind of important, so let's talk about this archive thing. If we go back in, cancel out of that. Did I click cancel? I might have clicked cancel twice. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so let's go back over. So if we look at this one, the last successful run. In fact, let's kick off another run now. So if I did a commit into my repository, it would kick off automatically, but I can come in here and say, I want to kick off the run on my branch. Okay? And it's got an API, so you can automate this or have it on your phone or whatever you care about. We can see here it's starting to run. If I come out, let's do it quickly so we can actually see it happening. Quickly, Malcolm, go in here. Yep, in there. Okay, we should be able to see this as it's going. Yep, so the first two stages are completed. This one's currently running. And we can click in and see, well, what's it up to? What's the console looking like at the moment? But our unit tests are nearly finished. Awesome, the whole thing's finished and it's green. Yeah. So, yep, it's showing, hopefully showing green here as well. If we go into it, we can see, okay, well, here was the output of my build. Okay, so I'll get all the full output showing me any compiler errors or anything like that. Wow, there's a lot, isn't it? Must have verbose set. Here's my tests passing. Okay, all 36 passed. Awesome. Here's me archiving the. Here's me recording the NUnit tests, and here's me archiving the artifacts. Archiving the artifacts means that attached to this successful build run on the artifacts tab, you always get your log of the whole build. Yeah, or the whole. I shouldn't say build because that means something else. Of your whole pipeline, yeah. But you also get, because I archived it, here's the exe that we built. Yeah. Now this is really important because let's say you did that pipeline we talked about before, and you built your exe, ran your unit tests, okay, told the developer everything was good, and then you went over into the QA stage and started and did another build. Or no, actually, let's make it even worse. We used that same executable and we ran all of our tests against it. Okay? And then we went over to the release phase and we did a final build. Yeah, maybe with some slightly different settings, turn off debug information or something like that. Okay? Bad news, you're about to deploy a binary that hasn't been tested. We tested the earlier binary. Yeah? All those tests that passed are saying that that binary was fine. Maybe there's been a dependency change in the meantime. Yeah? Who knows? Yeah? But the key thing is you build your thing once, or basically whatever you build, you make sure that you're testing the thing that you built all the way through, and that's the same thing you deploy. So sometimes where we've got tests that require debug information, we do a build, we run those tests, okay? Then we do another build, and we keep going with a whole bunch more tests to make ourselves confident. Yeah? Other tests that don't require debug information. Yeah? So that's why we're archiving this. It's available to the rest of the pipeline then to use to run tests, to deploy into a VM, to test it on Windows 7 or Windows 10 or whatever. Yeah? Secondly, that link, you can enable it. You can add your customers. We give customers access, limited access to Jenkins, just like we give them access to Jira. So they can come in, that link can be available to them either directly in there or on a website where they can pull down the release. So they're getting the exact artifact. Yeah? Once you've built up your installer, you can stick that in there. Once you've built up other things, release notes, whatever it is, documentation, you can archive them in there and then they're available. Yeah? Okay? I was intending to build one in front of you, but it's running out of time. So I'm I'm happy to do that at lunchtime if anybody wants to see one being built. But basically, it's going through. Oh, one thing that I will show you though. So I tend to build it by writing this manually, just because the editor's fairly new, so I'm not used to it. But if you are writing these things manually, inside Jenkins, if we come back here to one of your branches, on the left-hand side in the old view, in the classic view, there's this pipeline syntax link. So, because what happens is you get into your Jenkins file, and you're in here inside this step, and you go, right, I want to call the VirtualBox plugin to deploy it to this particular VM. How do I start a VM in VirtualBox? Well, it'd be nice if we had code inside here, but we don't. But what you do have is pipeline syntax, and so you can come over here and say, well, for all of the plugins that I have installed, so where's NUnit, for example, okay, here's one of the steps that it's exposing called publish NUnit test results. I can point this at my XML file, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, but blah.foo.xml, that's probably not that. And then go generate the pipeline script, so you can just copy that out of there and paste it into your Jenkins file. So that sort of gives you the right syntax. Yeah. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so in the interest of time, let me go back here and justify all this. Because probably right now you're thinking, well, yeah, okay, it looks all nice and fine, but why the hell would I do this? Or this doesn't apply to me. That's usually the response. I can see why this is useful, but not for us because we're special. You know, we've got these special requirements. And I used to say that too. Yeah, that's fine, but not for desktop apps. Anyway, we'll get to that. Lots of tools you can, once you start doing this, like that's about the simplest CD pipeline you can do. Build my app, build my unit tests, run my unit tests. Doesn't take long. I'll even give you the Jenkins file. You can just change the names. But even that alone has value. Immediately, if that was happening every single time someone did a check-in to your version control system, in many places that would be an improvement. Yeah. But there's lots of other things once you start thinking about it that you can do. Yes, build, you can do your unit tests, you can do your UI tests. Okay, if it's a desktop app, things like automated QA, what's the tool in there called? Can't remember what it's
Test
called.
complete.
Sorry?
Test complete.
Test complete. DUnit or DUnit 2, one of them has UI testing stuff. Matthias did a session on it a while back. Someone else did too. If it's a web app, we've used Selenium to drive open source, to drive, to test our web app. Yep, plug things in, write a bunch of tests in that. If it's a REST server, we've done this with some of the RAD server projects we're doing lately. We use this thing called BlazeMeter to automate REST requests, and so we can do testing of it, we can do load testing of it. Yeah, we can fire up 4 or 5 different machines for 10 minutes on Amazon and hammer our REST server. Yeah, throw hundreds of requests at it and see how it performs, what our response time does. Yeah. Lots of things. Code coverage. There's a link here to the open source Delphi code coverage tool. This is a really good one. When you run your unit tests, run them under the code coverage tool. So you both not only find out that, hey, all my tests are passing, but I've only got 5% code coverage, so I'm not actually testing very much. I shouldn't be too happy. Yeah.
You use Postman?
I haven't used Postman I use Postman for testing when I'm developing, when I'm developing against RAD server, but I haven't used it in a CD pipeline. Is it?
What are the big problems I've got with these issues?
Can we hold the problems until I get to the problem slide? Okay. Sorry, I haven't got much time, but we are going to have a problem slide. We're up 4 of them, I think. So code coverage, yeah, really easy thing to do, but another great metric to track, and you can publish it back into Jenkins and other tools. I keep saying Jenkins, but that's just because the one I know best. So, you know, it's not enough to know that your tests are passing, but have I got good test coverage? Yeah? And is my test coverage increasing? Or did we just commit a bunch of code that didn't have tests, and so I've gone from 80% coverage down to 70%? Yeah, that's not good. Yeah? They might all still be passing, but I've got my risk surface is bigger. Yep. Static analysis. We use TMS Fix Insight, but there's Pascal Analyzer, there's Code Healer. I think even at the end of the day today, one of the prizes on the list is Code Healer. Yeah? Great, you can run through and catch a whole bunch of things. I'm constantly happy and embarrassed when I run these tools over my own code. And I go, oh geez, I did that? Wow, okay. But I catch it before I go in. Well, you can automate it. Okay? Great thing to walk into a code review with. You go into a code review and you've already known, okay, these things, and potentially had a chance to fix them before you have your code review with your boss. Okay? Deployment. Pretty much anything you can deploy to, you can do it from here. Yeah? We've been, so, I mean, AWS, Azure, OpenStack, across the network, Docker, VirtualBox, VMware, FTP, into app stores, and into the Android emulator. We sometimes have stages if we're doing CD for mobile apps. We'll, have a phase where we deploy it into the Android emulator and run tests against it. Yeah? And then deploy it onto an Android device and run tests against it. Yeah? But actually, one of these, we've also just in the last couple of months started doing work with a company who does Salesforce development. Yep. And if you've ever seen the tools that Salesforce developers have, feel really sorry for them, because it's not even 1990s level tooling mostly, it's like back in the 80s. Yep. There's terrible tooling around for developers around Salesforce. Awesome product, but the developer experience is rubbish. Yeah? But you can do CD against it. We didn't know if we could or not, but you can. We can do tests against it. We can deploy to different orgs inside Salesforce. We can, install managed packages inside Salesforce, all that sort of stuff. Yeah? So deployment, you can do it. Install builders, call them, run them, get them going. Scripts. So often the fallback, if you can't figure out how to get something going, is, well, I'll do a script. So whether it's a Unix shell script or a batch script or PowerShell or anything like that, there's a PowerShell plugin for Jenkins. You can write custom plugins, but even before, I should reverse those around, because even before you get to custom plugins, if you've got a command line interface, you can do it. Okay? So all of these things are automatable. And plus, you guys can all write a little Delphi app that gets called from the Jenkins that does something. Yeah? We've done a bunch of those. So there's lots of stuff that once you start with that tiny little set of build my unit tests, run my unit tests, lots of stuff you can do. Yeah? I won't run through these principles again. But okay, so here we get to the common objections. So let me run through the common objections and I'll come back to you. See if I've hit one of your common objections or not, or if I need to add one. Okay, that's fine for simple projects. Our release process is too complicated. Yeah? I have 3 reactions to this. They come in order. Yep. And I have to stop myself, depending on the customer I'm talking to, I have to swallow 2 of them. Yep. The first one is crap. Yep. I usually have to swallow that one and phrase it a little bit more diplomatically, but rubbish. Yep. Second, once I swallow that one, okay, and go, okay, well, even if you're right, even if there's parts of your release process that are too complicated or too something, that doesn't mean do nothing. Automate the rest of it. Yep, so that you can get up to that painful point automatically, and you can get from that painful point automatically. Okay, that's still an improvement. Okay, but even then I go back to crap. We can probably automate. Yeah, you just haven't tried hard enough. Yeah. Or what often happens is organisational change comes out of this. Once one part of the process emerges as being the problem, and it's stopping the organisation from, the organisation starts to see benefits, and then there's one part of it which is the problem that's stopping us from getting more benefits. It's funny how often that one problem changes. Okay. It's not feasible to deliver our software multiple times a day. I kind of talked about this one before. That's fine. The key is about being able to deliver multiple times, or frequently. I don't want to define it as multiple times a day or whatever, but frequently. Multiple release candidates. Yeah? How often you actually roll them into production or out to your customer base or whatever is up to you. But get some feedback from somebody who knows. Not just Fred on the development team, because we don't know. Go. Why? Oh, it's not moving. Okay, hang on.
Dead.
Did you do that one? This one, okay.
Unit test the clicker.
Unit test, PowerPoint slides. I wonder if I can automate that.
Well, yeah, sure.
Okay, this one actually, this one came up again yesterday. I've had it before, but it came up again yesterday, so I put it in this morning. If our customers get used to frequent releases, they might expect it all the time. Now, I understand where that's coming from, totally, but listen to what you're saying. Yeah? Yes, they might expect it all the time, and that's good, because now you can do it all the time. When you unpack that, often what they mean to say is that one of two things: they might expect big features delivered in a short amount of time, okay? Or as a consequence, we as the developers might start compromising things in order to deliver quickly. Yep. So sometimes there's two sub-objections in here. It's funny, we hear this objection up front a lot, but we don't often experience it at the end. Yeah? Because what happens is, yes, they get used to frequent releases, but they get used to frequent small releases. So it's not like they're getting 15 new features every hour. They're getting little steps towards their features every hour, or as often as you do it, yeah? Or as often as they bother to look at it. Yeah? And so, yes, they build up an expectation, but it's an expectation of regular small progress, not big leaps forward. Yeah? And secondly, if you're worried about compromising equality, that's what all the tests are for. Yeah? So it's not that you just chuck in a quick hack and ship it out the door. No, your release train will stop because it's enforcing equality levels. Yeah? So you might try and do that, but it won't get out the door because Jenkins will come and give you a smack. Yeah? Okay. Okay, this one. We're too busy to muck around with that. Yeah? Which always makes me think of this cartoon. This is an old one. Yeah? This lets you move faster. Okay? It's going to make you less busy. In fact, we've seen it, and there's stats, like other people have done big DevOps surveys and CD surveys, and the numbers I've seen quoted, like one was the one that gets quoted a lot is the HP LaserJet firmware team. They get held up as they were one of the early people to do this. And they were automating the process of releasing the firmware for their printers. Now, obviously, they weren't releasing to all the printers in the world, but they were releasing to somebody who could give them feedback, someone internally, the test, or whoever it was. And they found that by doing this, a bunch of things, but one of the numbers that sticks in my head is that this took so much stuff off the developer's plate and gave them so much confidence to move forward that their developers were actually doing 40% more, they call it innovation, but what they really meant is that they were spending 40% more time writing code, not doing stuff. Yeah. So this will make you less busy, or let you do more interesting stuff, okay? And you don't have to build a 40-stage pipeline to begin with. Build the one I just did. Yeah? It'll take you, probably by the time you install it and everything, it'll take a couple of hours. Yeah? And get started. But I guarantee you'll get sucked in and you'll start, oh, I'll just add another step. And, oh, hang on, I've downloaded the code coverage tool. Let me chuck that in there and see what that does. And before you know it, you'll have this big process. Yeah? Okay. So did I cover your objection?
No.
No, what was your objection?
Oh.
And bear in mind, I've got 3 minutes.
I agree with everything that's pretty much there, but the biggest problem I've got with continuous deployment.
Yes, yep.
Yeah, okay. This is a barrel ones. One of the problems we've got is that the interdependency of tools. How do you manage the interdependency of tools? Because you might deal with Delphi, you might deal with .NET, you might deal with even Xcode on another platform. Jenkins is a great orchestrator of that, but it's not very, very good at managing the interdependencies of those tools in any respect. The only way that you can really do that, which is what I've been spoken myself with myself, is through what they call code deployment. Effectively, it's taking one level above the scripting, where actually the actual code itself becomes the deployment pipeline itself.
So before we go into this too far, just tell me what you mean by interdependencies between the tools.
Well, there's a lot of tools that don't work with each other.
Yep.
Okay. Jenkins goes a good way of doing it through its plugins process.
Yeah.
And even TFS.
No, but give me an example.
Delphi and .NET don't play very well with each other sometimes.
Do you mean being in production, being on the same?
Production.
Okay.
Production.
But that's not a problem introduced by continuous delivery,
No, it is.
or even by continuous deployment, which I'll talk about in a second.
Well, more deployment.
It's a deployment problem,
It's a deployment problem.
but it's not a CD problem.
It's more of a DevOps issue than anything else.
Sure. So that's a deployment problem, and in some ways you could say maybe it's an architecture problem.
Exactly.
But-
my belief is that.
But that's not a reason to not do this.
Oh no, in fact,
Even if you do all this manually, you'll still have that
I
problem.
agree with
Yeah.
I
So it's not. Sorry, I don't mean to cut you short.
Yeah.
We've got 30 seconds. But that's not an objection to this.
Oh no,
Yeah.
no. But my objection to anything with continuous delivery is the way that people are processing it, because I don't think it works very well. And a lot of people have gone a long way to try and fix it through DevOps and
Yep.
bits and pieces. But I think code now is
Okay.
really
All right. All right, we can have a chat later on. Okay, so results we've seen. A few things. Sorry, I should expand a little bit too. If you want to get in an argument, and I know there's no shortage of arguments everyone can get into in the developer world, but if you want to get into an argument, go to Reddit and make some comparison between continuous deployment and continuous delivery. Okay, and then stand back and watch the fun. Okay. So if you ask someone else, you'll get a different definition. My distinction between these two is continuous delivery means that you can deliver at any moment. Okay, you are continuously ready to deploy. Okay, continuous deployment takes it one step further, where it says, and we will automatically do the deploy. Okay, now that's doable, and sometimes the distinction is almost non-existent. It's like, okay, it's just an extra step. But as we were talking about, sometimes there's complications. Yeah? Okay, so we get much quicker feedback from the customer. Yeah? Great. We saw before, quick feedback cycles are good. This one is an interesting one. You get higher confidence levels in the developers. Yeah? They're not sitting there wondering, even subconsciously in the back of their mind, is this going to work in production, or is this going to work when we deploy it? They've got higher levels of confidence that it is. Yeah? Not bulletproof levels of confidence, but higher. Yeah? Less waste, rework, we've talked about that. Progress, and then importantly, the customer sees the progress if you let them. Yeah? And they should be able to see it because you're meant to be delivering to them. Yeah? And that's probably the biggest one, I think. Maybe the developer confidence and the quick feedback, but this one's massive. We've seen really toxic situations between business unit of developers, a development team and a business unit that was their customers. And the relationships were absolutely toxic. You went and talked to the business unit, those developers, they're all bloody useless. Yeah? And you talk to the developers and goes, those nutcases in the business unit, they just keep changing their minds. And yeah, it was terrible. I'm not saying this is the only thing that fixed it, but the thing that fixed it was the business unit seeing progress, because their ultimate complaint was we asked them for stuff and then it just goes into a black hole. And at some point in the next year something pops out and it's not what we asked for. Yeah? This changes that because they're seeing small progress, and before it gets too far off they can go, hang on guys, that's not what we wanted. Oh, okay, no worries. And it's a tiny change. Yeah? Better quality. Customers always having access to the work and build. Delivery isn't painful anymore. And like I just said, massive change in the customer attitude towards developers. Okay? I could give you a page full of links. Google continuous delivery. You'll find that page full of links. This is the Bible. Okay? Continuous Delivery by Jess Humble and Dave Farley. I regularly, that's actually, might even still currently be sitting on the bookshelf in my lounge room. I regularly just pick it up like a coffee table book and read stuff and go, oh crap, we used to do that, we don't do that anymore, I better go on. Yeah? So this is the book. It's pretty thick, you know. Get an e-book, because if you try and hold it up in bed, you'll end up bruising your face. But, yeah. So, thank you.
Thank you, Malcolm. Now, before you race off to lunch, hold on for a second. We've got some interesting news from
Germany?
In Germany.
Yeah.
TCG have been a sponsor this year, and of course Steve Arena with his Arena company has been involved in the user group going back, how long now? 10 years plus? 15?
Yeah, and if you well, used to seeing Steve at these things, I used to think he slept in a suit, but obviously not.
So often used to come over dressed.
Right.
No, yeah, sure. Greetings to all, happy to be here today. Matthias unfortunately can't be with us, but we're here to let you know that the continuity group is here to help you with your projects to ensure that